Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy WilOcho here on O and the C, and today we are going to be talking about the new Tampa Bay Buccaneers second round draft pick and potential future heir to the throne of TB12 the GOAT, and that is Kyle Trask, quarterback out of Florida. This is going to be an exciting video, so let's go ahead and get into it. First thing I want to say that I do like about Kyle Trask is the steady growth in his stats. Now, I'm not just talking about quantity, because he obviously played more near the end of his college career than he did in the beginning of his college career, but I'm also talking about quality. The quantity goes up and the quality goes up as well. His efficiency goes way up throughout his college career. His touchdowns rapidly increase, while his interceptions do not increase at all. So that shows you the just the overall growth as a player, growth as an individual, and I do enjoy that. I think that's a good sign, a good showing for anybody, any player really at any position, to be able to develop and become just a better version of yourself over time. The other thing I would say that I love about Kyle Trask, and this is something I'm sure we've all heard and you may think is a little bit overhyped, but I do think that it plays well for the situation he's found himself in, and that is the backup to now again backup story that he is living, having been a backup in high school, then a backup in college, and now of course going to be Tom Brady's backup in the National Football League. Safe to say Kyle Trask is a man familiar with being a backup. That is not unfamiliar territory to him, and I do think that that's important in a certain sense. I'm not going to overplay the importance of it, but it is important to know how to be a backup. A lot of people who are drafted in high rounds really don't know what it's like to be a backup because they've always been the star and they've always started. Kyle Trask, that's not the case. This is a guy who's familiar with the backup role, understands how to prepare as a backup, understands what it's like to be called upon when you are the backup and have to go in the game and play and participate. So I do think that that's something that, you know, is it going to make or break him? No, but I do think his former experiences will serve him well in his Tampa Bay experience. The best argument I've heard against Kyle Trask, and I've heard plenty of arguments against Kyle Trask, but the best one that I think I've heard to date is not even that the Buccaneers decided to draft Kyle Trask over, say, a Kellen Mond or a Davis Mills, but rather the fact that they drafted a quarterback in this year's draft at all. And the argument would go on to state that they should have just waited and drafted a quarterback in next year's draft. Didn't need to draft one at all this year. Very valid argument. Respect where that's coming from, and it's definitely one you could argue. The thing I would say in response to it, though, is I prefer the 2 years rather than one. So because the Buccaneers drafted Kyle Trask this season, everything is a little bit different. It plays a little bit different. And I'm talking, you know, kind of about media narrative here, but I'm also just talking about in the locker room, I'm talking about everything. Kyle Trask having 2 years to learn, of course, is better than 1 year to learn. I also like Kyle Trask getting in under Bruce Arians. Who knows how much longer Bruce Arians is going to coach? He may leave the Tampa Bay Buccaneers prior to Tom Brady leaving. So Tom Brady could play another 2 seasons, but Bruce Arians might retire after next year. Who knows? It's definitely year to year with Bruce at this point. And I do like the aspect of Trask being a part of a Bruce Arians team, even though Bruce Arians did make the comment when specifically asked about Trask's development that he's going to stay out of the way and, quote, try not to mess it up. Now, while I do believe Bruce Arians is not in charge of Kyle Trask's development, and the base premise of that quote may be true, I do still like the aspect of Trask just being a part of a Bruce Arians team and feeling what a Bruce Arians culture is, and just having the presence of Bruce Arians around, because I do think it's a good team with a high culture and high character, and I'd like Trask to be a part of that for as long as possible. The other thing I like about drafting him this draft rather than next draft is strictly, and I mean strictly, the media narratives. Now, here's the thing. If the Tampa Bay Buccaneers draft Kyle Trask next year, because of Tom Brady's contract length, everyone's going to just automatically go, okay, Tom's going to play one more season, and then boom, it's Kyle Trask's time to shine. He'll be the starter. Tom will be retired. Bang. It's cut and dry, plain and simple. That sets everybody up for more pressure, right? It puts more outside pressure on the situation that does not need any more pressure. Kyle Trask has then got the pressure of, he knows in the back of his mind, everybody's expecting in 2 years, he's going to be the guy. Tom Brady knows in the back of his mind in 2 years, everybody's expecting him to be retired. Everybody on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coaching staff knows we've got a year to get this guy ready because he's taken over. Instead of all of that added pressure mounting and the media hyping that narrative, by the time Tom Brady retires and it's Trask's time to go in, everybody will have forgotten who he is. And it's an unfortunate reality in today's media, but it works to our benefit here. If you're out of sight, you're out of mind, and you're not talked about. So Kyle Trask is most likely going to sit on the bench for all of the games and regular season and postseason this year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He'll be riding the bench. And as a result, everyone will forget about him. He will dissipate from the headlines. He will not get a lot of attention. Nobody's going to talk about him. Next year, there'll be a whole new crop of quarterbacks that come in the draft, whole new crop of quarterbacks moving around in free agency, and all of those guys are going to steal all of the headlines. Kyle Trask will not get any sort of attention. And the same will be for the year after that. So as a result, because of the media and the pressure that they would place on the situation if it were different and occurring next year and there was only 1 year left of Tom, this is beautiful because Trask now is going to fly completely under the radar. A lot of the people I hear almost joke about it. Yes, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers drafted their future quarterback. He's the heir to the throne in 2030 when Tom Brady finally retires. Or when Tom Brady finally retires at 50 years old, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have found his replacement. Rather than the narrative next year, which would again be a very strict, Tom Brady's got 1 year left, and then it's Trask's time to shine. It's a very different narrative, and I do like the idea of just less overall pressure being put on Trask. I would rather him not have to deal with that weight on his shoulders. Not to say that he can't, and not to say that he won't succeed. You know, he wouldn't succeed in that scenario, but why apply more pressure where it's not necessarily needed? I don't feel like we need to put that pressure on him, so let's keep it off him. In the long term, as far as Trask goes, I'm not going to oversell anything. Obviously, Kyle Trask does not have the highest ceiling of the quarterbacks in this draft, and it kind of hit me the other day that, wow, it's crazy that he is in a draft where he is forever going to be compared to guys like Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, and all of those guys that went in the first round. That's just crazy to me, but I don't really feel like he'll be receiving those comps as much as they will be compared to him if he starts doing well. Again, kind of talking about the media narrative here, but obviously us picking at 32 and Trask being a second-tier evaluated quarterback, unless he starts balling out, he will never be compared to those guys. It'll never be like, well, Trask is not, it'll always be framed from the other side of the narrative. Trask will be regarded as the underdog, and if they are underachieving or he is just excelling past their play, then they'll be looked at as underachievers, and Kyle Trask will be looked at as the guy who's overachieving. It'll never work the other way around because of the way the expectations are set up, which is really nice. The other thing that's really nice is I do think he will be heavily comped to Davis Mills and Kellen Mond, and even potentially Ian Book, an in-division rival, which is always exciting. However, I think that is because they were drafted almost back-to-back, and then Book a little bit later. But our guy Trask was drafted before all of them, and right before two of them. So I do think you're going to get those comparisons a lot. And the thing that's awesome is I love those comparisons because I think not even getting into entirely the potential the players boast or what I think their careers might be, but just the situations that they find themselves in. Kyle Trask is in by far the best situation to succeed. With all due respect to the Houston Texans, they have not shown the ability to functionally run a franchise lately, and they do not have nearly the talent that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have on their roster. Additionally, who even knows what the situation is with the Houston Texans starting quarterback right now? Is it going to be Davis Mills? Is it going to be Tyrod Taylor? Is it going to be, dare I say, Deshaun Watson, even though I think most of us don't believe that it will be Deshaun Watson. He is still technically on the roster, therefore I believe he's still technically their starting quarterback. Kellen Mond, again, he's going to Minnesota, and Kellen Mond's not even going to be the starter this year, and he may not even be the starter next year. Who knows? Kellen Mond, the situation is very up in the air. Kirk Cousins, that was kind of a surprise draft pick. Not that I think Kirk Cousins is outstanding or that the Vikings are set at quarterback with Kirk Cousins, but I don't think a lot of people expected them to go quarterback that early in the draft with Kellen Mond, I just don't think a lot of people expected that. I know personally that did catch me a little bit off guard, caught me by surprise. But I do think in those instances, I think our boy Trask is going to come out on top big time in those comparisons. And those are the ones he'll be receiving on a much more regular basis because of draft position and things like that. I think something that people are really underrating with Trask is right now, if Trask had to play, if he had to come in this season, God forbid, in a worst case scenario, he had to step on the field. I do think he would be okay. I think he would be good, decent, whatever the word you want to use. I think he would be adequate. I think he would be solid right now. If he had to step in, I think he could. That is an underrated kind of thing that he brings to the table that maybe some of these other guys wouldn't, because I don't know that I have that same kind of confidence in Mond or Davis Mills. They played less in college. Mond, to me, seems way more of a raw talent, and I do like the fact that Mond has that upside, right? He's got that potential that you could develop him into something more than what he is now. But the problem is for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if you're on a team that is a Super Bowl contender and they're ready to win right now, if you have a situation where you need your backup quarterback to play, we can't be throwing in a guy who is got a load of potential but isn't ready to play. We need a guy who could come off the bench and sling the rock for us and maybe fill in for a couple games here or there, a couple drives, who knows. But he's got to be able to come off the bench and be ready, which again is a perfect kind of flip and tie back into the fact that Kyle Trask has been a backup before, understands the pressures and what it's like to be a backup, because there is a different level of expectation when you're a backup, and some people don't take the role as well as others, and I'm not worried about that with Trask, which is nice. That is an underrated thing that I don't think that people are talking about, so I think that's a big deal in the short term. The next thing I want to address with Kyle Trask, and I just also want to put out there, by the way, nickname that has to be made for Kyle Trask. I talked about this in a Daily Bucs Minute. By the way, if you haven't followed the Instagram yet, guys, go check out the Instagram. Post Daily Bucs Minutes every single day, as well as other awesome Bucs content. So go check it out. There's some cool stuff there. But I talked about in a Daily Bucs Minute regarding Kyle Trask that a nickname needs to be put into place for this man. There's an obvious one out there. I'm trying to get the fire behind it and fuel it up. It's got to happen. KT2. That has got to be the nickname for Kyle Trask. If you don't know, he got his jersey number, and his jersey number is, of course, 2. So somebody's got to get out there and make some t-shirts, TB12 to KT2. Somebody's got to get out there and make those shirts. But the next thing I want to talk about with Trask, or KT2, is the number one concern that I've heard most people express. Now, I have heard some people talk about his mobility and that he's a slow quarterback. That's not a concern. That's just a trait, or a lack of a trait, if you will. But we'll get into that later. I want to talk about arm strength. I've heard a lot of people go back and forth on his arm. He's got a weak arm. Does he have a strong enough arm to play in the National Football League? Here's what I have to say to all of that. I'm a big believer in the logic that you don't need a cannon to play quarterback in the National Football League. And I hate that, people would just say, well, look at Tom Brady. Tom Brady doesn't have a cannon. But it's more than that. There's so many good quarterbacks in the NFL now and in NFL history who don't have amazing rocket arms. It's not a mandatory requirement to be able to throw a ball 80 yards and throw it through a wall. That's not something that you have to do. The main thing a quarterback's got to do, in my mind, has always been accuracy, read the field, and be a leader. Those are the 3 things you absolutely need as a quarterback. Without those 3 things, it's all going to crumble. It's going to fall apart. If you can't see the field, you cannot deliver the ball. And if you can't deliver the ball accurately, then nobody else is going to be able to make plays consistently. And if you're not a leader, the team won't follow you. It's going to fall apart. The structure will not be there. Those are the 3 things I think you absolutely need to be a quarterback in the National Football League. And arm strength is a nice addition to that skill set. Awesome thing to have in your repertoire, could make your game much better, but it's not a mandatory characteristic or a mandatory trait that you need in order to be successful. The other thing I'd like to say when addressing his arm strength is Bruce Arians, who of course is going to say this, but it is at least something I guess that's nice to hear. Bruce Arians said he has no doubt and that Kyle Trask has the arm strength to make all of the throws that they would ask him to make. To put into perspective, the max a quarterback really has to throw in terms of just down the field yardage on any given play is like 55 to 60 yards. Like at the most, you're throwing 50 to 60 yard deep balls at the absolute pinnacle. Other than, you know, a Hail Mary or some other fluky situation where you're trying to just heave it and throw it as far as you can, most offenses, that's really what you're going to do. You know, deep balls aren't much deeper than that. That's really what the range is. And I would say for all the people who are worried, you know, Bruce Arians, no risk it, no biscuit, right? Deep balls, deep balls, deep balls. And how is Trask going to fit into that without a cannon of an arm? Well, one of Trask's best traits is his deep ball. So understand that, yes, he may not have an overwhelming blow you away when you see it cannon of an arm, but he has great deep ball throwing ability. And that's because he puts touch on the ball, he's got good timing, all of that's all the other things that go into a deep ball throw. And, you know, I think people get caught up when they see that, you know, when they hear a guy's reviewed as lacking supreme arm talent, or doesn't have a cannon, doesn't have great arm strength, or superior arm strength, I should say, they think, well, he's just going to check it down all the time and we're going to look like the 2020 version of Drew Brees and on the New Orleans Saints, just throwing dump downs over the middle, can't stretch the field. That's not at all what this guy's game is. He can chuck it deep. He has that well within his game. Deep, intermediate, short, it's all available to him. Just because a guy doesn't have the absolute rocket cannon shot arm does not mean he cannot throw down the field. I mean, that is a very big misconception, and it's not like this dude's got a noodle arm. He's just got an okay NFL arm. He's got a good enough arm. And good enough means good enough. As long as you could do the other things that the quarterback position requires you to do, then you'll be fine having an arm like Kyle Trask. Now, to the other thing that I hear a lot of people complaining about, and this one kind of makes me feel a little weird because I don't really understand the complaints all that much, but a lot of people are saying, well, he's not mobile. This is a guy who's not a great athlete, and that's fine. Let's first of all take back, I mean, he's a good athlete, but he's not, you know, by NFL standards, he's not an elite athlete or by in any metric. Let's understand going in, yes, Kyle Trask is an old school type of quarterback, and it's no surprise that an old school coach like Bruce Arians, who runs an old school offense, would draft an old school style of quarterback. Now, I think the concern is that there's something wrong with this because the NFL has a lot more new school style quarterbacks. People think the old does not work anymore, and that's not the case. The old school, you know, pocket passer style of quarterback will always have a place in the National Football League, but it's just not as set in stone that that's what you have to be anymore. There is kind of that belief that you could deviate off of that pocket passer style and prototype into something different. And I think a lot of people are getting carried away and maybe take it a little bit too far to the extreme when you see guys who really struggle to throw but can run, get opportunities, and people are more excited about their potential than a guy who could just sit in the pocket and deliver the rock. Kind of to put it in, to kind of give it an analogy, old school quarterbacks and pocket passing quarterbacks are more like point guards, right? They're not really playmakers. They're more there to distribute. They distribute the ball to their teammates, to the playmakers, right? They take the ball and then they give the ball to somebody who can make a play. New school quarterbacks, some of the guys you see nowadays more frequently in the National Football League, are more like shooting guards. They're more playmakers. They have the potential to distribute the ball. Yes, they still do distribute the ball, but essentially they're more of a playmaker than a point guard. They're more of a shooting guard than a guy who's a distributor and a passer. Now, while that's wonderful to have a guy who can make those plays, generally speaking, this is obviously is not the case with every individual player, but generally speaking, the guys who are playmakers aren't as good with the distributing aspect of the game. And you see that in the NBA, you see that in the NFL. You look at guys that fit that shooting guard mold more, and they're not as polished at being point guards. And of course, that's because they never have had to be that polished. I think, personally, you could win with either style. I feel like too many people, because of the way the NFL seems to be trending now towards that shooting guard playmaker type of quarterback more than a point guard style of quarterback, too many people think that that's the only way to succeed. And they forget the fact that you could still win sitting in the pocket. It just puts different values on different needs for your team. It just emphasizes different things. Obviously, you need to have a better offensive line. Things like that, right? A scrambling quarterback or running quarterback even. You don't need the same offensive line protection that you would need for a guy who's going to camp the pocket. But that's not the end of the world. It just requires a different element of team building. When did we get to the point where a quarterback having no mobility outside of the pocket was a negative? That was something that used to be viewed as a rare positive, just as something that's a nice add-on. Instead, now it's becoming a situation where it's like mandatory, or it's literally looked down upon if it's something you don't have in your game. Well, I think sometimes we forget these guys are quarterbacks, right? They're not running backs, they're not receivers. They're not even you're not out there to be an athlete all the time if you're a quarterback. Not all quarterbacks are. And there's nothing wrong with having a quarterback that's just a pedestrian athlete who can play quarterback. I think that's why when I look at a guy like Kellen Mond, I'm not trying to trash Kellen Mond in any way, because I would have had excitement inside of me if we drafted Kellen Mond as well. But I think when you look at a guy like Mond, yes, he's got some athleticism, more athleticism than the average quarterback, but can he play quarterback as well as Kyle Trask can play quarterback? That athleticism will help you make plays and help you in specific moments, and certain things will be easier for you. But when push comes to shove, on a 3rd and 15, can you stand in the pocket and throw the ball? And that's something that I think some of the shooting guard type of quarterbacks and some of those athletic playmaking style quarterbacks struggle with. And it's something that our guy, Kyle Trask, KT2, has literally done his entire life since he was a kid, because that's all he's ever been able to do. He's never been the most dominant athlete on the field. So I think that's something that is underrated. I think people are forgetting that, of course, you could still win with an old school style, a point guard style of quarterback. People want to place everybody in a bubble and, pretend like you can't win like that anymore. And I do think that style of quarterback is still relevant in today's National Football League. Ultimately, I'm excited about the Kyle Trask draft selection. I think it's a good pick. It's high value, I think, for where he was drafted, especially when you hear Bruce Arians talk about the fact that they were discussing taking Trask in the 1st round. I am really glad they did not take Trask in the 1st round. I personally still might have been just as good a pick, obviously, as taking him in the 2nd round, but I'd have been bummed out because coming off a Super Bowl, 1st round pick, you wanted to be a guy who could come in and play. You wanted to be a guy who's at least going to play and games, step on the field, have an impact for your team, and potentially help you get back to the Super Bowl. So I'm glad they waited. They held their water. Jason Light doing well in the draft again. Understands the hand he's dealt, plays it as well as he can, gets our guy in the 2nd round. And I do kind of feel like this might be overzealous, but I think Trask will absolutely be the best of the Tier 2 quarterbacks when it's all said and done. I don't think Davis Mills and Kellen Mond are going to be better in their NFL careers than Trask will be. And I also think he'll be better than a few of the Tier 1 quarterbacks as well. Now, I do think he's got some stiff competition, right? You talk about Trey Lance, Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones. That is a group of guys that have a lot of potential between them and a lot of just talent and ability, and that is going to be a tough overall group to supplant. But I do think a couple of them, when it's all said and done, will wind up behind Kyle Trask. Kyle Trask will have a better NFL career than some of them. Not going to say names, not going to say who's going to be better than who, but I do think some of them will wind up worse quarterbacks than Kyle Trask, and the Bucs are going to come away from this in 4 or 5 years. Tampa Bay fans will feel this way as well. Like, we got our guy, and we got the right guy for the draft that we were in. Now, obviously, look, if we'd have taken a quarterback last year, next year, 2 years from now, it'd be a different prospect, and that's a whole different discussion. But I do believe we came away with a very solid NFL caliber quarterback who will one day be ready to step in and make some plays for our organization. Personally, I just can't wait for the preseason, right? I just can't wait because ultimately, you don't judge a guy just by one preseason or just by one game. But man, usually when a guy steps on the field, like, you can tell if he's got it or if he doesn't. And of course, you can still, if you struggle early, you can rebound and get better and work at your craft and improve, of course. But usually when a guy steps on the field in preseason, you can see, is there something here? Is there nothing here? And I just can't wait for Trask to get that opportunity. I cannot wait to watch him sling it on an NFL field against NFL competition and just see how he looks. KT2 in a Bucs uniform, going to be super exciting. Going to be something to watch out for. I really do like this pick, and to all the people out there who don't like the pick, you got to be patient. Like Bruce Arians, Jason Light, they've earned our trust. I would say they've earned our trust. If this is the guy they believe in, this is the guy they see a lot of potential in a future with, then we got to give him that opportunity to show what he can be. right? Before we knock the guy, we've got to at least give him a chance to step on the field and do something and show us what he's all about. That is going to do it for this one, guys. Leave a comment down below. This is an awesome topic to debate, go back and forth on. I mean, I know everybody feels some type of way about this. I mean, how could you not? You got it. This is literally our potential future franchise quarterback. We could still be talking about this guy and maybe even revisiting this video 10 years from now. There's actual potential for that to be the case. So you got to be excited. Leave a comment. Leave a like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. But really, leave a comment. This is a big one. You guys got to leave a comment on this one because I'm super pumped to see how the fan base is reacting to this. What are you guys thinking? What are your, like, I don't know, what's your belief on it? Like, do you think it was a good pick? Do you think it was a bad pick? Do you think we shouldn't even have gone quarterback? Did you like one of the other quarterbacks? Are you hyped? Like, let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys for sticking to the end. I do really appreciate it. Kyle Trask, KT2, is a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. Your 2020 Super Bowl champions.